now going to move on to our featured speaker for today. His name is Adam Orman. If you don't know Adam yet, you will. He's been working in the restaurant industry for over 20 years in the big three. That's what I like to call them. New York, San Francisco, and right here in Austin. He opened Loca d'Oro, an Italian neighborhood restaurant in Mueller back in 2016 with his business partner, Chef Fiore Tedesco. I am looking forward to, just as much as you, hearing from Adam about his view on the intersection of ripple and creativity. Please welcome to our Zoom spotlight, Adam Orman.
Hello, Ben. How are you? And thank you so much for having me here today. It is such a treat to be able to talk to a friendly audience of little tiny faces all the way over there. I am Adam Orman. I am the co-owner of Loca d'Oro restaurant in East Austin, along with my best friend, Chef Fiore Tedesco, who is a Yankees fan. I am also, as Ben mentioned, the project manager and founding member of Good Work Austin, which provides support and resources for businesses that want to provide benefits to promote a sustainable Austin as a whole. 6 weeks ago, this talk was done. I was prepared to talk about providing jobs, saving for restaurants to provide meals for Austin's food insecure communities, and how Loca d'Oro found itself in a position to do that work during the pandemic. We were going to talk about businesses, helping other businesses and nonprofits, and working together with city agencies to create a ripple out economy. Nice metaphor. Then the storm happened and everything stopped. Everything was frozen. Gas stopped, water stopped, power stopped, food deliveries stopped. For a moment, there were literally no ripples. But this provided a very powerful test for the ripple out economy and an incredibly powerful end to this part of the narrative. Now, I am definitely not an economist, but when I was growing up, trickle-down economics was the prevailing economic model. Trickle is not a nice word. It's unpleasant in your mouth. The ch and the k are these like hard sounds that make your mouth stop. The word itself kind of calls to mind bathrooms, like leaky faucets that are trickling and leaky old men. And the economic metaphor is like there's this thing up here that is drip, drip, dripping down to where there's like a little bit left over at the bottom for you to fight over. This is not a good metaphor for the masses to rally behind. Ripple, on the other hand, is a beautiful word. It's like bubble and dribble and little. Like these are words that make you smile. And as a metaphor, it's one drop that spreads and grows over an even surface. Again, I cannot explain why this is successful economic theory, but a much, much better metaphor. I am from Philadelphia, and we are sports fans. I grew up in central Pennsylvania, but my family is from Philadelphia. And this informed the conversations that I had with Ben and how I promised to frame this whole conversation in a clunky, awkward sports metaphors, because he said, there's not enough sports metaphors in Creative Mornings, and sports are creative, so go for it. And so I blame him for this part of the speech. You can blame him for this part of the speech. If you're going to be a sports fan in Philadelphia, you need to take the long view. Philadelphia Phillies have been around since 1880 playing professionally, and in that time, they have won 2 World Series. So we are not in it for trophies and championships. We just want games. We want to be able to watch more games. It could be this season, it could be last season, it could be next season. I just want games because I don't expect to be a part of a parade at the end of any season. I don't think that there are winners and losers necessarily the way that these greedy cities like New York and LA with their Derek Jeters and their Magic Johnsons and their Yankees and their Lakers expect to be paraded at the end of every season and the keys to the city and the big rings and the shining, and they're the last team standing. And we associate kind of greed with these cities, right? And there's this like zero-sum game approach to sports that was never a part of my life, was never a part of trying to watch these teams that lost all the time. So when I went into business, I suspect that I was expecting to be an underdog. But even though I'd been in hospitality at that point for almost 20 years, I had no idea how many obstacles we would face and how many we had created for ourselves because of how unlevel the playing field is between the fast food chains, the sit-down chains, the food trucks, and the independents. And you say, well, you're not all in the same game exactly. You're not all competing with each other, but we are. We are all working to control the narrative of what food service looks like in America in 2021. And I learned very quickly after opening that the Yankees and the Lakers of my industry would be just as happy with their trophies if there were no other teams in the league. And Fiore and I just wanted to keep being allowed to come out to the field and play every night. We opened in 2016, and we had two areas on which we were not going to compromise. One was the food. Ben mentioned earlier, we wanted to be Italian in spirit and make everything that we could in-house from what we found closest and what was most accessible and what was freshest. And we wanted to support the local economy in that way. So we make the cheeses, the fresh cheeses, the salumi, which is really just more salami, by the way, and the breads, and we make liqueurs and we make vinegars, all these things. And on the other side, we were never going to pay anybody $2.13 an hour because this is an absurd amount of money to pay another human being. So we were going to start with a mandatory hospitality charge that would be distributed to the entire staff, and everyone was going to start at above the federal minimum wage. And we thought that could just be a thing that we did to professionalize our restaurant and get grown-ups working there who were going to know all of our customers, and the customers were going to know them, and it was going to be this beautiful neighborhood spot where everybody knew what everybody was going to order before they even sat down. But nobody else was doing this, and it turned out to be a much more difficult thing to implement than we anticipated, and it required a tremendous amount of messaging to our employees and to our guests to get buy-in. And what that meant was we needed to make friends and we needed to do research. So I found national organizations, Ray's High Road Restaurants, Restaurant Opportunity Center, Main Street Alliance, One Fair Wage, who had done the research. And I learned that tipping comes from slavery, that it is part of Reconstruction where slaves were given a $0 tipped minimum wage and subsisted on the tips from their customers. In the early 20th century, it finally was raised to a quarter, and from then until 1991, under the first Bush presidency, it was raised to $2.13, where it still lives today. I also learned the racist act of tipping and sexist act of tipping, that the Economic Policy Institute has determined that tips are much more predicated on the sex and race of your server, white men make more, than the actual quality of the service. And finally, the link between sexual harassment and tipping, that if you are dependent on a customer's benevolence to feed your family and pay your rent, then you need certain tables and certain sections and to work certain nights, and you need your food to come out at certain times and in the right way, which leaves you open to a tremendous opportunities for sexual harassment, not just between customers and servers, but between managers and owners and cooks. And the EEOC receives more sexual harassment complaints from the restaurant industry than any other, and we know how many of these complaints are unreported. So we are probably doubling any other industry in terms of sexual harassment complaints. We also made friends with the school district. We developed an internship program with the technical high school. We worked with their middle school culinary program. We worked with other restaurants to talk about our wage model and talk about how they were working on benefits, and just kept trying to grow our circle. In 2017, City Council called and asked us to be a part of a team that was writing the paid sick leave ordinance for Austin. Saying yes here was the most important business decision that I have made, because our network grew immediately and exponentially. We got to sit for several months with a huge group of businesses that were all interested in helping their employees and figuring out how to make this thing work. And it passed, and it was great, and it was triumphant, and it was immediately appealed. And we spent the next year and a half in court and at the Capitol defending it, and hearing the opposition, and hearing that paid sick leave was going to kill jobs. It was going to raise prices for customers. Employees were going to lose other benefits, that it was this tremendous administrative and financial burden that small businesses could not possibly take on. And we realized from that that paid sick leave and higher wages are not just employee benefits, they are community benefits. And in order for them to really make an impact, this can't just be one restaurant here and there having the choice to implement. It needs to be the entire community providing paid sick leave as a public health interest and raising wages to help eliminate poverty and food insecurity. So we started Good Work Austin, and we had 3 pillars: healthy employees, healthy businesses, healthy communities. A ripple. Then the pandemic happened. And because we already had some of these connections with the city, we immediately started advocating for food access contracts to be moved from the national chains that typically service stadiums and institutions to local businesses. We were restaurants, we had kitchens, we had food, we had employees that didn't have any work to do because guests weren't coming into our space, guests weren't allowed to come into our space, remember back then? And it made sense. It was a win-win-win-win. Sometimes it's a 5th win, but usually it's just the 4 wins. We were, any money that was going to come from a contract was going to help keep a restaurant's doors open, was going to pay that employee, was going to pay a local farm, so that was going to be one of our requirements for the food that they were producing, and was going to feed an Austinite. Another ripple. And we got a contract from the school district, and we were able to put 7 restaurants to work. And we got another, we continued working. We talked to UT Health, we talked to Dell, we talked to City Council, we talked to the mayor's office, we talked to the city manager's office, we talked to Emergency Operations Center, we talked to Office of Sustainability, we talked to the Department of Homeland Security. And through all of these relationships and emails and phone calls, we got another contract from Public Health to help to feed the unhoused. We got a contract from Emergency Operations, and we were able to start getting donations to fund our own projects with food pantries and with another group to provide meals for unemployed hospitality workers. The circles continued to grow. And then the storm happened. And I was on the phone on February 12th, when Austin was still beautiful. There were just like the icicles on the trees that at night my son looked out the window and he was literally just looking in our backyard and said, "Daddy, there's stars." And of course there were not stars in my backyard, but that was the ice on the leaves of the trees, and it was incredible. And then nothing good happened after that for 2 weeks. Over that weekend, Austin Public Health, we had talked to them on Friday and about what they might need for the following week and what we could do differently with the contracts that we were working. And we talked about maybe providing a few more meals on Sunday for that Monday in case the roads were impassable. But that weekend, on Sunday in particular, they activated the warming stations and the cold weather shelters, and things got bad. And they called and they needed food immediately at the Palmer Event Center. And I was able to get into my restaurant and get meals there. And on the way home, I couldn't get up that little tiny hill at 6th and Lamar where the Whole Foods is to turn left to get onto Mopac. It took me about 20 minutes. It was very embarrassing. And I spent the rest of that drive talking to Austin Public Health about the numbers. Who did they need to feed? And I got home and I started calling all the restaurants that were working on our projects, because the school district project was canceled for that week and we had food. We just needed to be able to get into the restaurants to get it. And that's what all these people did. They got to their places and we drove. We drove to all the rec centers, we drove to the schools, and we figured out ways to get, we drove to these protective lodges where the hotels that the city has bought, and we figured out ways to get food to the people that the city needed. And we were making do, and then things got worse. Power went out, and water went out, as you all know. And Food and Wine Alliance stepped in and said, "I know you're doing this work. What can we do to help?" And they blasted information. Donations started coming in. Nonprofits heard about us and said, "I know you," because we'd been on these food access calls with the city and with the other nonprofits that restaurants had never been on before. There were always these two circles. There was like the circle of people who helped feed folks who could pay and people who helped folks who couldn't. And this year we started to work together. And so they called during the storm and said, "We need food, can you help?" And the city was still in contact. And the restaurants said, "We know you guys are doing this work. We want to help. What can we do?" And over the 2 weeks, World Central Kitchen came in and Jose Andres came in to help us administer it. And we got between 50 and 60 restaurants to prepare 100,000 meals in 2 weeks. And do that little part to help ease the pain of the storm and what it wrought. And I am so grateful that we already had the foundation to build out when the storm started. And I know that this is the right answer for how to move forward, and that we had been working in the right direction prior to that. Sorry, I thought I heard something. That we need restaurants all over town. We need, I just got muted.
I'm sorry, Adam. I think in our attempt to mute the noise that we were hearing, we inadvertently muted you. So we'll just let you know.
I'm out.
We didn't hear you.
I don't do this, Ben. This is the right thing. We were doing the right thing, and the work was validated. We want restaurants all over Austin, a network to be able to take these contracts and provide meals for the people in their communities, and to be able to hire people from their communities. And then we start to address food insecurity and poverty in different neighborhoods, and we're not relying on one big building in South Austin to try and feed the entire city. But this is not about trophies and championships, and just because the storm ended there was not a parade. And in fact, on the Tuesday, the first Tuesday in March, I was having what was supposed to be kind of a congratulatory interview, and in the middle, the governor announced that he was removing the mask mandate and opening up to 100%, and pretty worn down at that point, and it didn't help. That was a gut punch where I thought we were going to start to be able to coast, and the interview turned immediately from a talk of the storm to how are you going to react to the governor's new announcement. And I remembered that this work never ends, and it is incumbent upon all of us in our industry and all of us everywhere to understand that there isn't a parade. And if we want to be a part of a world that is not about winners and losers, and where everybody gets to come out onto the field, then we all need to figure out how to be the ripple. This is where you do this, Ben. And I want to thank you for your assistance and your support, the city's support during this last year, and hope that you go out and buy some takeout this weekend from a locally owned restaurant that pays a living wage, and have a lovely weekend. Thank you for having me.
We want to open it up for folks who heard this story that have questions to be able to ask them. So I'm going to throw it over to Mars, who has a question. I know you're looking forward to talking to Mars, Adam.
I always look forward to talking to Mars. Casey Snowballs, everybody.
Adam, thanks for the lovely talk. There was, and somebody else asked it in the chat too, which was, is there a way to identify, say, which locally owned restaurants are kind of living or are operating under some of the principles that you outlined? And also, if anybody wanted to, say, contribute to Good Work Austin's cause, how might they go about that? So those are my two prods.
Excellent. Yes, to both. So we have a website that is very close to being revamped, that has a list of a number of restaurants that particularly signed on to work under, at the time, our Shop and Dine with Confidence protocols that we developed last April to try and open safely and responsibly. Not all of those restaurants do exactly the same things in terms of what they provide for their benefits, but they are all on the path. We have another 150 members who are a part of Good Work Austin. The way we operate is that we meet you where you are. If you are someone who wants to help feed the community, but you are not yet ready to pay $15 an hour, or you do but you don't provide health care, or you do but you don't provide paid sick leave, if you are all about zero waste, or there are a lot of different ways to engage with Good Work. And then our goal when you're in is to push you along and get you even closer to a goal where I shouldn't say there isn't a goal. There is no end to how much you can do for your community and for your employees. So in our new website, we'll be coming out. We'll have a list of even more small businesses that you can support. Goodworkaustin.org is the place to go to donate. There is a button even.
Always have a button. That's number one lesson to take away. I know Brittany actually put the link in the chat. That's as close as we get to a button here in Zoom world. So smash that button.
And all of that anything that you donate, we are an entirely volunteer business owner-led organization. So whatever you donate goes to our meals and goes to a restaurant to provide meals. So it is all staying here. And I cannot talk enough about supporting local economy and that doesn't, and what that really means. I talked to Austin Public Health at one point this year when we were trying to move a contract, and they said, well, they were referring to a company that is a national chain that was doing the work before us, and they said, well, their employees work in Austin, or employees live in Austin, and that isn't it. Like when the money goes to that company and it gets shipped out to the investors all over the world as a part of this publicly traded thing, you are not rippling. You are, when you support a local restaurant, 95% of the money, especially for places that is staying here, and that's not even including the places that support local farms. We spend everything that comes in, and our employees do, because they're generally still low-wage workers. So it definitely means more than just handing over the contract to folks whose employees happen to live here.
I know that you've been doing this work for a while, and that you get called in for opportunities to talk to people who don't understand this as well as you do. As I wait for any other questions that come in, do you want to just mention what you've been doing on Capitol Hill lately, or what you've been doing to help spread this word in other places?
Sure. Yeah, I thought this is where you were going to pivot to talking about March Madness.
Not yet.
Okay. We don't talk about that in Austin, I guess. So the Capitol. So far this year has been about defense. There's a preemption bill, which is to say that there's a bill that was floated in 2019 and didn't pass, and is up again this year, that will preempt any local ordinance that goes beyond state law. So the paid sick leave ordinance was targeted. Construction workers' water breaks are targeted. Plastic bags, fracking. They finally removed non-discrimination ordinances from it, and that was why it didn't pass in 2019, but they thought they would try again in 2021. I'm saying I'm not being very inclusive here. I'm sorry. So that is something that we're speaking heavily against, seriously against, and as are most folks on labor. And what's interesting about us is to be able to go in as a employers organization and say, no, we're against this too, because it's mostly labor that's lined up against, and employer organizations like the Texas Restaurant Association, Texas Association of Businesses, the Chambers of Commerce, that are all for a lot of this legislation, because it just makes it simpler for the business to operate. But I don't, as you could probably tell from my talk, I don't think it's sustainable. It creates, to let businesses operate unchecked and assume that there's sort of this triangular battle between employers, employees, and the community is short-sighted. So we spoke at the Capitol this week about that bill. There's bills next week to raise the wage. There are more bills in the session this year to raise the minimum wage in Texas than there ever have been, which is encouraging. And they have gotten a hearing, which is also encouraging. So I hope that they'll actually get out of committee this time. There are some interesting bills to combat sexual harassment in the workplace and add language that actually even includes sexual harassment as a type of discrimination in the workplace, that we are speaking for as well. It's interesting, and you should all do it. You should all figure out a way to get to the Capitol and either go for a day and watch and see what it is that you're going to be up against and what it's going to look like, and then go the next day and testify. There is absolutely something that is happening that you care about, whether it's voting rights or LGBTQ issues, and it's very easy. I was really surprised at how comfortable and safe it was. You test yourself going into the Senate on the way there in these National Guard tents, and everybody wears a wristband, and it was pretty empty in there, so it was still easy, and most people were masked, so it was pretty easy to space, and it is an invaluable experience, and something that, especially since we live in Austin and it's so easy, I feel like we owe the rest of Texas, because it's hard to get from El Paso and then sit there and not even know when your hearing is going to happen. They give you very short notice, and they don't really give you a schedule, so it is kind of rigged to make it difficult to testify. But we're here. You show up at 8, plan on taking the whole day, bring some water, and be a citizen.
I can't thank you enough for doing that. I know that for many of us, there may be something on our schedule next. It's totally fine. I understand if you have to go. We have one more question. I'm going to give the community here a chance to ask. Geeka, can you unmute and ask your question?
Thanks, Adam, for everything you're doing. I don't know much about the restaurant business. I hardly know anything. And I'm curious about what you've done with your business model, your strategies to make these policies functional and sustainable for your own business. Thanks.
We lose money. No, that's not true. That's a horrible answer. We were definitely helped by the fact that we started knowing that this is how we were going to go about business. So it was always part of the budget. There is an incentive to obviously there's the incentive of paying very little, but there's also a tax incentive that restaurants receive at the end of the year when they pay $2.13 an hour. I'm not going to get into exactly how it works, but it's in the tens of thousands of dollars. So a lot of restaurants that want to transition not only have to figure out the way to do that, but then also have to say, well, what am I going to do about losing this $30,000 that I've been getting every year? This is crazy, and it boggles my mind every time I say it, that you get to pay people $2.13 an hour, and then you also get a tax credit. We don't hire anybody really from outside the restaurant to do anything. So it's not easy, but we do our own social media, we do our own PR, we do our own design work, and we're there a lot, and we rely on our staff to work hard and really care about what they do, and that we knew that was going to need to be the case if they were going to be because they're such an important part. So it's a matter of just not compromising and keeping really tight controls over every part of the business. I think about the other side, and I think about going into a bank and saying, well, I'm going to do this, I'm going to open this business, but I can only succeed if I'm only paying $1 a month in rent. And the bank would laugh at you, right? And that's what 213 is. And if it means that we're just going to break even, but we're going to do all of these things that are the right way to run a business, then that's what we're going to do. And we've been very lucky. We have a lot of support in our neighborhood, and we're still here. And I think all of the things that I talked about, getting other people on our side, and creating strategic partnerships that usually aren't a part of a restaurant's life cycle, have been the most important thing to keeping us around and spreading the word about what we do.
Yeah, I mean, when we first spoke, I think the thing that I underlined from your talk here that relates to this too is like you're creating a professional environment for folks who want to be a part of the hospitality business professionally. It's not just to stop on their on the way to their summer job or whatnot. It's really something that they can care deeply about. And uh, I don't know anything about how it is to run a business either or a restaurant, but it seems to me that if you can make it work, then it should be possible for others. And I think we all admire. I see all the comments coming in. Admire you digging in, understanding what you're up against, and then also taking action to kind of right the wrongs that have put us in a position where this is the easy way shouldn't be the default way. So we want to thank you again, Adam, for coming to this space and sharing of yourself. We want to thank you for being part of this community of Austin and making it a better place through that work. I can't thank you enough for that. It makes me proud to be to say I'm an Austinite with people like you in it. So thank you again.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks a lot. It's been really fun talking to you.
It's been great talking with you too. Hopefully you'll come back and be a part of this community as when you're able.